About 40% of people said that they had felt lonely in the past month. Loneliness and social isolation can increase your risk of early mortality by around 26 to 29%. And it's equivalent to the risk of early mortality from smoking around 15 cigarettes a day. When you are feeling stressed, that can increase your stress hormones. Cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline. This can lead to long-term inflammation. And so inflammation can then increase your risk of cardiac disease, can increase your risk of stroke, and can increase your blood pressure. These stress hormones have effects on your immune system.
The cost to this problem is massive. What can we do right now?
Well,
our next speaker is Professor Elizabeth Broadbent.
Professor Elizabeth Broadbent is a health psychologist at the University of Auckland.
She studies how robots and technology help people feel less lonely and healthier.
She's worked with the likes of visual effects pioneer Mark Segar. Mark has worked on films like King Kong, Spider-Man, and Avatar. Elizabeth worked with Mark to develop the digital brain, an AI-driven human that has memory and full conversations with humans.
And her research shows that robots, like Paro the seal, can help older people feel happier and even remind them to take their medicine.
so it's really cute, it's white, it's fluffy. Sometimes people with dementia don't really engage with people very much, but they actually can engage with the robot. You can put it on your lap and cuddle it. It's got sensors in its fur that sense when you're stroking it. And what we found was that loneliness reduced in the group that had the seal.
Would you like to be funded as part of loneliness treatment?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Quick one, Mina here. Thank you for watching this episode. I appreciate you. Thank you for all your support. One thing that you can do for me is to please hit the subscribe button below. A lot of people who come and watch this podcast or listen to the podcast are not subscribers, and so we're trying to increase our subscriber base. We are wanting to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of this year. I promise you that if you hit subscribe, I'm going to work hard to make sure that my episodes are really good, that will get better and better. So, do we have a deal? Okay, back to the episode. Professor Broadbent, welcome to the podcast.
thank you for having me.
I have so many questions for you. First of all, what is your mission?
So I am a health psychologist. I'm a professor at the School of Medicine at the Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences at the University of Auckland. And a lot of my work is involved in helping people who have got illnesses and helping them cope with those illnesses. Because, being diagnosed with an illness can come out of the blue and, it can really affect you emotionally and cognitively and affect your work and your relationships and everything. So helping people cope with that. And I guess one of the pathways to do that is through digital interventions. And so that's where some of my work involves robots and digital humans and digital apps to assist people with their illness or with their lives in some way.
Fascinating. There's so much I want to find out now. I'm fascinated that you actually were interested in human psychology, but you've got such a different background. You actually were you an engineer at some point?
Yeah, so I initially trained in electrical and electronic engineering at Canterbury University because when I was growing up, I was really interested in science fiction. And so I watched a whole lot of movies with robots in them, like Star Wars, and I read a whole lot of science fiction books by people like Isaac Asimov, who wrote about, I guess, the problems that society has, and that robots, because they are able to take in so much information and process things, can help guide humans to make the right decisions to avoid, calamities and things like that. And I thought, and also he writes about robots as companions for people who might not be able to have their own friends for one reason or another. And I found that really fascinating as well. And I wanted to do that. So that's why I went to the School of Engineering at Canterbury to make these human-like companion-wise robots that can help humans.
And fast forward to today, you have been part of a number of projects or research that looks into how can we use technology, robots, and help people. Can you tell me a bit more about what is the biggest problem that we're trying to solve here in terms of why we want to use technology for people? How is that going to really help? And what is the issue here?
So I guess society's got a lot of problems.
Yeah.
One of the problems is that we have an aging population, and so as you get older, you're more at risk for developing illnesses like heart disease, stroke, other illnesses. So, and we don't have enough resources in our health care system. So how can we help care for those people?
Yeah.
And so that's one area. Another area is that due to societal changes, we do have a growing problem with loneliness. And that can affect older people, and that often they are in a position where perhaps their partner has passed away, perhaps some of their friends have also passed away, perhaps they've got a disability so they can't get out, and therefore they're more socially isolated. But it can also affect anybody, really, and young people are at high risk of loneliness as well, and that's because often they might have left home, to go work somewhere else, or go to university somewhere else, and so they're isolated and they haven't built up a friendship network yet.
How big is this problem at the moment?
So there have been surveys in the US saying that approximately half of people have felt lonely, and in New Zealand, in the 2021 census, about 40% of people said that they had felt lonely in the past month.
40% of people?
Yeah, so I guess it might not be problematic for everybody, all of those people, but they're still indicating that they have felt lonely at some point.
I mean, that's a high percentage.
It is a high percentage.
40%. 4 in 10 people.
Yeah.
So are we talking about loneliness in terms of... So you're talking about societal changes for... societal changes for the elderly. What are the societal changes that has contributed to the elderly being and feeling more lonely at the moment?
So I guess society has changed in terms of people are no longer, in the past, a lot of people would go to church. It was a real community hub, and the number of people going to, some religious place like a church has really dropped in the last, I guess, 50 years or so. 50 years, yeah. And so people are not meeting with each other as much. Also, community groups like, Lions or something like that. They still exist, but they're, less than they used to be.
Yeah.
Also, like the COVID pandemic has really affected the amount people socialize with each other, because obviously during the pandemic itself, we were all isolated and then we had to work from home. And so we weren't seeing our work colleagues as much. And still now a lot of people are working from home rather than going into the office, or maybe they go into the office 3 days a week instead of every day. There are other societal changes as well, such as family size. So we used to have much bigger families.
Right.
And now people are choosing to have no children, or maybe only one or two children instead of, 5 or 7 like families used to be. So, people often might live alone rather than living in a large family.
Do you think that the COVID pandemic has, obviously it's made a lot of changes to us, but is the effect still very much alive and influencing how we do society at the moment, how we do socializing? Is it still affecting us?
I think the combination of, smartphones and the COVID pandemic have together created more of an issue. I think for older people, it's not so much of a problem because they have had a life where, I guess they've built good social networks, and everyone's kind of gone back to the way it was before. But for young people who've grown up with smartphones, and they spend so much of their time scrolling their smartphone, they're socially interacting over, the phone, but they're not getting so much face-to-face time. And I think the pandemic exacerbated that.
Do you think we'll ever get over the effect of the pandemic?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, that's good news. Gosh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, humanity's gone through, pandemics before, the Black Plague, other pandemics, and we've gotten over them. It just takes time.
How long do you think it's going to take?
I don't know. A lot of people are back to, their normal social lives. They're going out to dinner, they're seeing their friends, they're back to work, everything. So, some people are back to normal already. Others, are enjoying working from home.
Yeah.
But I think, I guess, the COVID virus is still around. It's still affecting people. And,
yeah. I want to touch on the impact that loneliness is having and social isolation is having on our health. Because I understand that there's, we get sick, and if I have asthma or diabetes or heart disease or obesity or physical inactivity, air pollution, that has an impact on my mortality, on the effect of when I might die. Where does loneliness sit?
So research suggests that loneliness can affect mortality, and that loneliness and social isolation can increase your risk of early mortality by around 26 to 29%. So it's quite large, and it's equivalent to the risk of early mortality from smoking around 15 cigarettes a day. So it's a major risk factor that has probably not received as much attention as it should.
Are you saying that it's the number one cause of mortality above?
No, I wouldn't say it's the number one cause of mortality. No, but it's a risk. It's a risk factor.
Yeah. How does it really impact, or the lack of social connection? How does it really impact mortality? Are we talking about the biology, the psychology, and the behaviors? Can you delve into that? Explain to us how does it really affect it?
Yeah. So loneliness. I'll just define loneliness to begin with. The way that it's often defined in the literature is a feeling of distress when our we would like to have better social connection than what we've got. So the quality or quantity of the social connections that we have is not what we would like it to be. So that's loneliness, and social connection on the other hand, social isolation is measured more objectively. So social isolation is by looking at, how many, community groups we belong to, and the number of friends we've got. Whereas, the loneliness is more of a subjective feeling of distress. So when there's a few mechanisms for how social isolation and loneliness can affect your health. So one way is that when you're feeling lonely and socially isolated, you feel less supported and you feel more threatened. So it makes you feel less safe. And so you tend to interpret situations as more threatening, and you feel more stressed. Because when you've got a lot of friends around you, you know, you can share your problems with them. They can help you to see issues in a different light. And they can also help you by bringing you, you know, food or supporting you when you might be ill. They can really help, and they can encourage you to do things like, you know, go out and exercise, because it's more fun to go and exercise when you've got a friend with you. And they can help you, when you've got troubles, you know, they can come around and help you, you know, fix your roof or whatever. But when you don't have that support, you're trying to deal with these issues by yourself, and that can increase your stress levels. And so when you are feeling stressed and, you know, emotionally upset, that can increase your stress hormones. So things like cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline, these are stress hormones that are helpful when you are in a sort of acute situation, stressful situation, like a lion is chasing after you, or, you know, you're running across the road and there's a car coming towards you. But if you're under long-term chronic stress, these stress hormones get dysregulated, and so they are not turning on and off properly. And this can lead to long-term inflammation. And so inflammation can then increase your risk of cardiac disease, can increase your risk of stroke, and can increase your blood pressure. It can increase the build-up of plaque in your arteries. And then, experiencing a sudden stressor then, if you've got this plaque in your arteries, can help rupture this plaque, and then you can go on to have a heart attack or a stroke. Also, these stress hormones have effects on your immune system. So your immune cells have got receptors for these stress hormones, and this can affect the cell's ability to, your immune system's ability to combat viruses. So you get more susceptible to viral infections, and you're less able to overcome the viral infections. In addition, if you have a cell that is becoming cancerous, normally your immune system might be able to kill that cell, but if you're under stress and you've got these stress hormones, that can affect the ability of your body to kill off that cell. And that can affect the speed at which cancer can spread.
Wow, so it's profound.
Yeah, there's all of those kind of biological mechanisms that can happen. There's also behaviors. So if you are feeling stressed, you might be more likely to eat unhealthy food. You know, like you start eating your chips and your hamburgers, and you might be less motivated to go out and exercise. You also might be less able to get to the doctor when something goes wrong. Because if you've got, good social support and you're feeling sick, then, somebody can take you to the doctor, or somebody can advise you, you really should go to see the doctor. Yeah. Whereas if you're by yourself, you might delay a bit more, or maybe you don't have the transport to get to the doctor. So there's behavioural mechanisms as well as these biological mechanisms.
The impact is massive. Well, from what I hear about loneliness and what's really going on in the background in our bodies, and the mechanical way of the body, and the way that the mechanics of the body and the brain and the chemicals and all that, it's almost, I could say, disturbing, because it's a big problem. And why haven't we done something about it from the root cause? Like we've got a lot of solutions for diabetes, a lot of solutions for heart disease, solutions for the medications and things like that that could help us treat the symptom, but the actual cause behind the scene is the stress, which, loneliness or social isolation. Bit of a long question, sorry, but why isn't loneliness being looked at more deeply? And why aren't we doing something more about it?
Well, recently the US Surgeon General actually issued a call to action in the United States to try and address this problem more. And there are several different ways we can look at trying to reduce loneliness. And it's not just at the individual level. So we don't, there are things individuals can do for themselves, but there's also things we can do at a community and societal level to help reduce loneliness. So things like thinking about how we build our communities, how we have our schools operate. Geographical and the cultural kind of environment that we have can influence loneliness as well.
Can I get into that a little bit more? Can we zoom in onto how that can look like, if you may? How we build our schools, how we build our roads. I have no idea.
Yeah.
What can we do right now? Because clearly the cost to this problem is massive. Like, if you're going to allocate a number to the cost of loneliness in New Zealand, it will be very...
I can't really do that.
It'll be very difficult. But if you think about the costs to the treatment of diseases and that we exhibit.
I mean, I guess the influence of loneliness on healthcare alone would be very large. Yeah.
This is a business podcast, and a lot of the people that listen to this are people who are entrepreneurs and CEOs and people who are young professionals working. They're striving to make it in this world and to be the best possible version of themselves. Surely they're going through stress right now with all the changes in government and the losses of jobs and the economy and the inflation and so on and so on. All of these things are really impacting on the stress and hormone levels and whatever. So we have a problem, of course. And stress is not only going to impact then on our health system, but it's going to impact on our economy as well, because if the health professional or the business professional is impacted and stressed, it's going to have an impact on their business, and there's cost in there as well. So the cost, I would imagine, is massive. The response to that, the problem is massive, but the response to that isn't massive really. I don't really know what we're doing in terms of reduction. So going back to the building, what are we doing to build? What are we doing to make this actually better? Building our roads, building our schools. Can we please delve into that? How can we do our schools differently?
Well, there's a lot of, I guess, imaginative and passionate people out there, and they come up with some great ideas. For example, I was talking to a school teacher down in Cromwell the other day, and she was talking about how they have a program where they get retired builders in to the schools to help teach those children who are interested in building and perhaps not so interested in academia some skills, and how that program has really, really helped in terms of getting, I guess, older people in to pass on their skills to younger people. And it's good because it helps give people who are retired a sense of meaning, because they are passing on their skills to a new generation, and it helps gives those young people a sense of worth because they are learning new skills, and it's creating a community because relationships shouldn't just be, for a young person. It's helpful for them to have relationships with older people outside of their immediate family as well. So they have these sort of mentors and role models who are,
definitely,
helping them and giving them, teaching them all sorts of skills, social skills as well as practical skills.
It was funny. I was chatting to some friends on the weekend, and we were talking about the Netflix series on having the elderly rest homes, bringing the younger children to the rest home on a regular basis, having that interaction, and measuring the factors for depression, anxiety, mobility, stroke, all these health measures. And after the experiment was over, the elderly were remarkably increased. Got a lot, they got better. They felt better. They were able to move. They were motivated more because the children are really fun, like little kids. And they were really fun. They were 7-year-old, and they were so happy and kind of cheeky, and that kind of you don't know what's going to come out of their mouth. And so the experiment was so hope-giving. I think it was also in Australia, and I just don't know why we're not doing that more in New Zealand.
I think we do have that here. We do have school children visiting older people in some retirement villages.
We do?
Yeah,
Okay.
I know. I was at Selwyn Village, or one of the Selwyn retirement centres, and they had high school children come in and talking to a group of older people. And, yeah, it was really nice to see.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those kinds of programs are great. It really helps, I guess, connect people across different age levels.
So technology use as well is something that we are seeing more and more now being used to help with social isolation and loneliness. How is that planning out for you? I'm sure you've got lots to say on that.
I think technology can be helpful, and it can also be harmful. So there has been research looking at whether social media can reduce loneliness or increase loneliness. And a lot of the research is pointing to the finding that people who are already doing well, so they've already got good social support, they tend to use social media in a way that is beneficial. Whereas people who are perhaps lonely to start with and they start using social media, then they're not using it in a beneficial way.
Can you expand on that? How is the first example being done and the second example being done?
So I guess if you've already got a good social network, then you're using social media to connect with that network. So you're kind of building what you've already got. Whereas if you're lonely, it's more difficult to create new social connections that are meaningful if you don't already have friends. So you're kind of reaching out to strangers rather than your existing social network.
Or would you also look at social media and just look at what's happening with everybody else and what they're doing? And
yeah, so sometimes on social media people present, only the good stuff.
Yes, yeah.
Look at what I'm doing. I'm at the beach, or I'm eating this wonderful meal.
Or I'm in Rome.
Yeah. I'm on holiday. And they don't show, the bad things in their life. So when you are looking at it, you can go, I wish I was doing that. Or, those people are so successful and I'm not. And so that can create some difficulties.
Yeah. So back to technology. We're talking about technology being helpful, but also harmful. How is AI playing a role in this?
Yeah, so I think it's a real challenge for anybody out there who's in the digital world to try and create technology that helps build social connection rather than reduce social connection. And I guess with the older people, one of the technologies that's been out there for a while now is these companion robots. So there's probably the most commercially successful robot is called Paro. Paro is a baby seal robot. So it's really cute. It's white. It's fluffy. It's about the size of, I guess, like a little dog kind of thing, and you can put it on your lap and cuddle it, and it's got sensors in its fur that sense when you're stroking it or patting it, and it's got beautiful eyes that open and close, blink sort of these eyelashes, and it makes seal-like noises, and it's actually got a heater inside it as well, so that it's sort of like body temperature. And it was made to be a baby seal robot because people often don't have any familiarity with baby seals. You know, they might have seen them on some Antarctic program on the TV, but they haven't actually seen one in real life. So it doesn't have to be as realistic as a cat or a dog who we are familiar with every day. And it doesn't have to jump off on the table and do things like that. So a seal is quite a good object or animal to make. So anyway, there's been a lot of studies done with Paro now, and we did a study with Selwyn Village, and we showed that we randomised people to have weekly interactions with the seal robot in a group, or they would go out and do their activities like playing bingo or whatever the village had on that day. So it could have been going on a bus trip. And what we found was that loneliness reduced in the group that had the seal, but it stayed kind of stable in the other group. So the seal can help reduce loneliness. And that can happen through several different mechanisms. So actually it can be through directly holding the seal, cuddling the seal, so that it's like having a pet dog.
Yeah.
But also people in the group talked to each other more than they did when they were playing bingo or on the bus trip. So it increased those social interactions between people in the group, so that it gave people something to talk about. So it's like some people get worried that if you're going to give someone a robot, they're not going to talk to other people anymore. You know, it's going to take away social connection. But studies have found that actually robots can increase social connection. And and I guess another example of that is, you know, people might be in a bed, sort of in the hospital section of a rest home, and someone might bring in a cup of tea for them, and they don't really have anything to talk about with the older person, you know, the nurse or the caregiver. They don't have anything in common. But if there's a robot there, then they start talking about the robot.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, oh, what have you got there? Oh, it's a robot. Oh, that's really cute. And then it's like, oh, it's like a dog. Oh, have you ever had a pet before?
Yeah.
And so it gets some conversation started.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, this is so fascinating. So there's actually, you've found that there's an emotional connection between the elderly and Paro.
Yeah.
So do the elderly actually develop a bond with the pet?
So some people do, other people don't. So it's quite individual. Yeah. We have had instances where we've, you know, shown people Paro, and especially people who may have dementia. It can help calm them down, so it reduces agitation. So it's like soothing and calming. As well as that, sometimes people with dementia don't really engage with people very much, you know, but they actually can engage with the robot. So someone, we had one person who didn't, you know, you would talk to him and he wouldn't talk back, but when we gave him the seal, he started talking to the seal. So, you know, some unexpected things like that can happen.
So are you saying that the Paro would have an impact on how bad the dementia is, can actually help it get better? Have you had any records where?
Not so, no. It can't really. There's no evidence that it can change cognition, but it can increase physical activity. It can increase, it can reduce anxiety, reduce depression. So it's kind of reducing some of the impacts of dementia on people's mood.
So why do you think a robot might be a better therapist than a real dog?
Well, we did in our study look at the comparison between a real dog and a robot. And in our study, the dog belonged to one of the staff members and would follow the staff member around. So it didn't really spend too much time with the residents. Also, the rest home had a cat, but the cat liked lying on one particular bed, you know, and didn't really socialise with other people either. So, you know, I guess pets can have their own personalities and desires. So we found that people had more opportunities to pet the robot than the dog. But, I mean, dogs can be very helpful as well. So that's why people are trying to make robots in the shape of companion pets, because we know that people who have pets, they get out and exercise more because they have to take the dog for a walk, so that can be very helpful. Also, you know, dogs can be great companions.
They're amazing companions, and they're so smart. They
are very smart. Yeah.
Very intelligent. And actually, it's not just smart, but cats are smart as well, but I feel like dogs are, like, they want you.
Dogs are more loyal. Yeah.
They display emotion, and even in their sound. And you can tell that they're upset or they're so happy. Even the look in their eyes is just powerful.
Yeah.
I don't get that from cats, really. There's a bit of a different experience with them. I'm a dog person. Well, are you a dog or a cat person?
Yeah, we have a dog.
Yeah.
So I don't think robots are better than dogs.
Yeah.
It's just that for some people, they can't have a dog, you know, because maybe they're not mobile enough to take it out.
Yeah.
And maybe
they
might be allergic to cat fur or something, you know. And
so,
you don't have the same hygiene problems, you know.
Yeah. So the alternative, obviously, is to have a robotic dog that has artificial intelligence in it, that is able to interact and evoke emotions in the elderly. Where are we at with this project? I mean, are we expecting to see a flood of Paros going down to Selwyn College, Selwyn Rest Home, and other parts of the country, or? Yeah,
I guess.
Where is it going?
It's challenging to make robots.
Is it expensive?
It's expensive. It's challenging because they have to be reliable. You know, once they're out there, out of the laboratory, they have to work every day. You know, you can't have them breaking down all the time. And robots have got motors inside them. They've got, you know, lots of joints and things that have to work consistently well. And like you said, it's expensive.
How much is it to make one robot dog?
Well, I guess to buy Paro's about $5,000 US. Paro's not the only robot. There are sort of more toy-like animals, like Joy for All dogs. They're more in the sort of $100 mark, but they're less sophisticated, and there's been less research on them. So you can get cheaper ones. And, you know, not all robots are companion robots either. That's just one type of robot. There's also people who are building robots to help people remember things. So to remind them to do things, like take their medication, to educate them about that illness, to prompt them to do physical exercises, to help keep them in touch with other people through telephone calls, video calls, and provide entertainment to people, have some games on there to help them be cognitively healthy, talk about the weather or the news, so that's another kind of robot, and progress is definitely being made on those. So research has, I guess, had robots in people's houses. We've had that, and it's helped support people, helped increase their adherence to medication, helped increase the amount of exercise that they do. So that's been really good, but a lot of these robots are still at the research phase, so they're not reliable enough to be able to be sold commercially. And I guess what you need commercially is somebody who's going to be there when somebody's robot is not working properly. They can ring up, the 0800 number, and someone will come around and help them, fix it. So it's a bit like having, Vodafone or whatever. When you've got a problem, you can ring them up. Whereas when you're a university professor, you've got funding for your research for, let's say 2 years. So at the end of that 2 years, you can no longer provide support for the robot. Because you can't pay your postdoc or researcher to provide that technical support. So you have to take the robots away again, which is again, can be
frustrating.
Well, of course it's frustrating for the researchers, but also for the people who've developed a bond with that robot.
Yeah.
Now we're taking it away. So, the good thing about Selwyn Village is that they actually bought Paros after we finished the study, so that the residents could continue to have that companionship. But I guess
to follow up with that.
And the good thing with the Paros is that they don't need much technical support because they are robust, which is why they're one of the most commercially successful social robots out there. Some of these other robots that we're trying to make to support people in other ways, there are some companies that are going into that space and making these little robots that they are supporting, but that's more, it's happening in the US and not here. Not here yet. So there's space, I guess, for more development in that area. And artificial intelligence, the advances in that with the large language models, the generative AI, that is a huge game changer for building those robots and making them better.
Well, to some extent, there's some good news in what you're saying. So the work that you do involves research, and it takes about, 2 years, 3 years. You have funding for that. Have you had any interests from commercial companies, anybody who's willing to invest in the production of 1,000 Paros and turning it into a commercial venture and taking it up to a massive scale?
So Paro is a commercial company. It's a Japanese company, and they do make thousands of Paros, and they sell them worldwide.
Right.
So they've got factories in Japan. I've been to one of their factories. It was quite interesting.
What's it like?
Yeah, it was great. They have all the rooms you can go around and see making all the components and putting them together. And then at the end, they put the fur on, and then they have people, trimming the fur to, around the face to make it look cute. And they're all slightly different, and they can have different colours. So anyway, they've sold a lot in a lot of different countries, including Scandinavia and the US. And the US, it's now a approved medical device. So it's
Oh, I see.
approved to be safe from things like pacemakers.
Right.
And in the US, they have it funded by Medicare,
Wow.
whereas
Wow.
here we don't.
Would you like that to happen though? Would you like to be funded as part of like a treatment, loneliness treatment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be beneficial for some people. And
Yeah.
if you do a cost benefit analysis, like we've done some cost benefit analyses of robots, and they can be effective and cost effective because they reduce things like visits to the doctor.
Well, they reduce all the things that we talked about earlier, wouldn't they?
Well, there's no
There's
evidence of robots being able to reduce things like heart disease yet, because
Right.
the development of robots or social robots is relatively new, and the trials have tended to be relatively short term. So you might look at the outcomes over 4 months or a year and show that loneliness reduces, but the trials have not been long enough to show that it reduces mortality.
How long have you been looking into that on average?
I started my job as a lecturer at the University of Auckland in 2006.
Right.
And I teamed up with Bruce McDonald, who's from the School of Engineering. So I'm in the School of Medicine. He's in engineering. And together with Bruce, as well as other people in the medical school like Nari Kurse. So she is in general practice, and she works a lot with older people and nurses and pharmacists and others. We've all worked together on various projects over the last, I guess, 15 to 20 years.
But in terms of the technology that we're talking about, not enough research has been made on Paros, because it needs time to look into the impact that it will have on cardiac heart disease and obesity and diabetes. How long would you need? The question is, how long have we been looking at this, perhaps in New Zealand or overseas, and then how long do we need to have enough evidence to? The point of that is to support the funding of it in New Zealand and have it being made as like a pacemaker that will save a life and reduce costs, really.
Yeah, so to look at mortality, you need obviously a long study, which is very challenging in research.
Yeah. How long are we talking about? How many years do we need to have to really get a good result, good outcome, or a good
you're
good
probably
length?
looking about 10 to 20 years, because it obviously depends on what age the people are when they enter the study.
Right.
And so often with research, say if you were looking at people with cancer and you were giving them a psychological therapy to see whether that therapy could help reduce distress, reduce stress hormones, reduce perhaps recurrence of cancer and mortality from cancer. There has been some research that has shown that cognitive behavioural stress management can do all of those things: reduce distress, reduce recurrence, and increase the length of life. But that research costs millions of dollars and takes, you have to follow people up for, at least 10 years to show that.
Yeah.
And robots haven't really been reliable enough to do that. And, you've got to make the robot to fit the needs of the population. So I don't think a Paro robot would necessarily be suitable for people, with cancer, because even though it might be nice to cuddle, it might not have the same effects as for, say, people later in life, say with dementia. So, I mean, I guess the research could be done. You could see it, but I think perhaps, like things like cognitive behavioural stress management, they teach people how to deal with situations in their life and how to problem solve, how to do stress and relaxation exercises, which can help reduce their stress directly. And so, that's a very effective treatment, whereas Paro doesn't actually teach you anything. It just, provides it. It's like a dog kind of thing. We are trying to look into making a digital version of cognitive behavioural stress management for people with cancer, because at the moment it's available only in face-to-face therapies in the US, and so it's not available here. So we are doing some research in that space.
Yeah. You were talking about the effects of stress on our body, and part of your research is looking at the effect of stress on wound healing. And that would be quite an interesting subject to discuss, because the people who listen to this, again, are, young professionals, like 30-something-year-old, and, they might have a scratch on their hand or something, and they go, why isn't it healing? Or perhaps it's because you're very stressed. Can you tell us about how stress can impact wound healing?
Yeah, so stress, again, it's about, there's different kinds of stress. So there's stress that is acute and short term. So like, say if you have to give a presentation at work, then you might feel stressed about it, maybe the night before and a little bit beforehand, but that, once you've given the presentation, it's over. So that's not harmful kind of stress. That stress actually makes you prepare because you're feeling anxious. So you prepare, and then you're actually doing something about your stress level, so that helps reduce your stress level, and then you give the talk and it's over. So it's the type of stress that has been studied in terms of wound healing is usually been more chronic. So there was some seminal research by Jan Kekok-Glaser and Ron Glaser in the US, where they compared older adults who were looking after someone with dementia compared to another older adult who had the same characteristics like gender and age, who wasn't looking after somebody with dementia. So it showed that people who were caregivers had higher stress levels, and that was chronic because they'd been looking after this person for, years in some cases. So it's chronic elevated stress. And when they made a wound in the skin, so it was like a small, what we call a punch biopsy wound, which is only, it's a small round wound about 3 or 4 millimeters. And they looked at how quickly that wound healed. And the ones who were carers, their wounds took significantly longer to heal than people who weren't carers. There's also been some research that they did some research with students as well. So students during exam time versus during holiday time made a wound, same kind of wound, this time in the hard palate of the mouth. And students during exam time, that wound took longer to heal than during holiday time. And when we're talking about time to heal, it's usually just, it's a matter of days or weeks. It's not like long term. There has been some research looking at chronic wounds. So say people with diabetic foot ulcers or leg ulcers, looking at psychological factors involved in the healing of those wounds. It's a little bit more complicated though, because often those people have got underlying conditions like diabetes that I guess have got more disease-associated variables that you have to take into account. But the way that it happens is, again, through these kind of stress hormones. So that what you want to happen when you get a cut is that you have a strong inflammatory response, so that it gets rid of any infection in that wound, and it can, once that, infection, any infection is gone, it starts recruiting other cells to help replace collagen in that wound. So you want the inflammatory phase to be fairly short and then move on to the other phases of healing. And what happens if you're under a lot of stress is that inflammatory phase can keep going and you don't move on to the next phases as quickly.
Okay.
So it can extend the time of healing. You know, some of the studies we've done extends the time of healing, say, from 10 days to 14 days kind of thing. So it's not you know, a big difference, but it's statistically significant. And so we've also done some studies looking at how we can improve wound healing, and things like relaxation techniques and deep breathing have been shown to improve the speed of wound healing.
Wow. How?
Well, again, it's through the reduction of stress hormones. So things like if you measure cortisol, or you measure alpha amylase, which is another indication of how your nervous system, sort of your stress hormones are working. What happens is that when you are doing these relaxation techniques, it can reduce your stress hormones, and therefore your immune system can work more efficiently.
You've done some work on digital brains with Mark Sager and Soul Machines, and I'm fascinated to find out more about what that was like, and, you know, what did you do, and what's the technology, what are we studying, and what are we coming out of it? What's the impact?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of robots, we were talking about robots earlier, and robots are expensive to make, and you know, they have to be reliable, and all their motors have to work, etc. With these things that we call embodied conversational agents, so a conversational agent can be something like Alexa or Siri that you talk to, which is typically on a phone or on some kind of cylindrical device. If you give that a face and a body, then we call it embodied conversational agent. And it can be in the form, you know, of a sort of a cartoon kind of character, or it can be a more highly realistic, what we call a virtual human. And so these characters, you know, can be made to look extremely realistic. And so that's what Soul Machines has done. And Mark Sager and his colleagues have, they set up Soul Machines, and Mark made a digital baby, which you can look up online if you want to, and it's all biologically based, because Mark is a biomedical engineer. And so he has made this very sophisticated computational model of a human, and he started with a digital baby and then extended it to adult versions. And so he has, you know, if you want to hear more about it, it's best to probably hear him talking about it, because he knows it all. He's the genius in that area. But what I've done is I have worked with the adult versions, and I have studied how people relate to them, and whether they can be used, I guess, in a psychotherapeutic context to deliver things like relaxation therapies, mindfulness therapies, if they can help address loneliness. So that's, kind of work I've been doing in that area.
What are you able to tell us what you've come up with? What are the outcomes at the moment that you've seen? Like, will these digital humans be able to replace a therapist, or replace a friend, or replace, I don't know, a professional that we're struggling to find, like a doctor?
So we're not looking to replace anybody.
Good news.
Good news.
For some people.
What, I guess, as I said earlier, you know, we don't have enough GPs. You know, you hear on the radio all the time that we've got positions in hospitals that can't be filled. And there are people out there who are not getting the care that they need. And, in terms of psychologists and mental health, there is a lack of psychologists as well. People are on waiting lists. So what can we offer people
while waiting?
Yeah, while waiting to see a therapist, or indeed once they do get to see a therapist, that therapist, what can we do to reduce the workload for them? So one thing that people have been working on is digital apps, I guess, digital therapies, using websites to deliver cognitive behavioural techniques, other techniques like mindfulness that the therapist can say, in your case, I think this digital therapy is going to be really helpful. So I recommend this one. Go and try that one. Give it a go for a few weeks, come back and see me and tell me how it's going. Because things like cognitive behavioural therapy are quite regimented in the way that they are structured, then digital technologies can deliver them. But you do need that therapeutic oversight in some cases, and that therapeutic oversight can help increase engagement. So a lot of people try out apps and then they try them once, maybe twice, and then they give up. So that's a real problem. Trying to improve making what they call sticky apps is trying to increase people's adherence to these therapies. Like adherence to medication is a problem, also adherence to therapy is a problem, and adherence to digital therapy is another problem. So what we're thinking with these digital humans is that they can be like a human therapist in terms of increasing engagement, because you've got this human-like character, building rapport with the person, so creating clinical empathy, providing support, and guiding them through the therapy. Again, we'd still want some, ideally have some therapeutic oversight, but it's not necessary. There have actually been some good studies showing that website versions of cognitive behavioural therapy can be just as effective as seeing a clinical psychologist.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So the digital brains have such a potential because they are learning, they're learning consistently, they're developing their memory. Like I'll tell them one piece of information, a fact, then they'll store that. Next day I will meet, they'll remember that and they'll build on top of what I've told them. So it's like a human have like memory and able to analyze what I tell them. Is that what we're dealing with here? Or?
So I guess there's lots of different digital techniques methods, and programs out there. So embodied conversational agents are, I guess, the interface that people work with or can work with. Other technologies don't have digital humans. They just have like a website with text on it, or they click on various buttons, etc. So most of the research in this area has been done more with the websites without any virtual humans on them. But I guess what we are interested in is how virtual humans might increase engagement and the ways of delivering these therapies. So in terms of what you're talking about there with memories, in some cases you do, I guess, some applications that doesn't remember what you said before, which I think is not as good as if it does remember.
I agree, yeah.
Obviously with a friend, you want to get to know your friend better over time.
Yeah.
So you want that person or digital friend to know who you are and remember things.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be able to make sense of previous experiences and previous stories and connect them together and form a and I think ChatGPT now is doing that a little bit more. I can't even keep up with the latest model.
Technology is advancing really fast.
Really fast,
So there are some I guess digital models that can remember things from your last interaction, and there are other digital models that can't.
Yeah. It's also fascinating and gives me so much hope for the future. And I think the work that you're doing is fascinating and so important. And I just want to thank you for the work that you do on behalf of all the people who might be using these services or products in the future to make their life better, to have a better, more meaningful life. On a final note, Professor, would it be okay if I ask you, if I was to look on your notes or diary, I suppose, what would I find written down there?
I work quite closely with my research groups, so it's all of this research is certainly, it takes a team. It's I have colleagues like other professors in engineering, in the medical school, bioengineering. We have students, PhD students, master's students, postdocs, and we have international colleagues as well. So often these projects are international.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my day involves meeting with the other people, meeting with my students, helping guide them in their research directions, writing up the results of any research that we do and publishing it, because that's important. Also, when you're designing new projects, it takes a long time to think about, what is the research question? What is the research method going to be? And then you have to apply for ethics approval. So that always takes a while as well to, demonstrate how you've thought about any ethical considerations. And then, of course, there's teaching as well. So, taking lectures for students in health psychology. So, yeah, those are, I guess, some of the things I do. There's also what we call service. So academics are expected to do service, which is things like organising conferences, reviewing other people's papers, marking theses, doing journal editing, all these kinds of things, reviewing grant applications, so that's also part of my day.
Yeah. Well, this is fascinating and it's amazing what you do, remarkable what you do. And so thank you for what you do. If anyone wants to follow your work or want to find out more, where can they go?
I guess a good place is looking on Google Scholar. So Google Scholar is, I guess, a place which academics have got their profiles, and you can look at anybody's name who's an academic, and you can search the research papers that they've published.
Awesome.
You can also look at university websites as well.
Awesome.
I guess the reason why these embodied conversational agents have promise is that they can run on anybody's smartphone or computer or laptop, or iPad or whatever, tablet. And so they're much easier to disseminate than a robot, because if you have to buy a robot that's going to cost $5,000 or $10,000 for each person, it adds up. Whereas people have usually already got some kind of digital device, and as long as they've got an internet connection, they can access websites, they can access chatbots and virtual humans.
And this is the accessibility part where you want to make sure that people actually have a chance to make use of this technology.
Exactly, yeah.
Without having the big ticket.
Yeah. And so people who live in rural communities, like away from the big city centres, they might not have as much of an opportunity to visit a psychologist. And even people in cities don't have that much chance to visit a psychologist either. But like distance and rural communities often have poorer health services. So increasing access to health services is one thing that digital technologies can help do.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.